Hey guys, welcome back to the 1937 RCA RR-359B Field Test Television Restoration Project. Hang on. Let's slow things down a bit and take stock of the situation before I make any more moves. A few days have gone by. I've gone through all that I brought back with me. Let's go over that first. And I've also done a lot more research with the help of some friends online. And I have some more about the background of this set. So let's start out with what all exactly we have here. So as I said, we have the two chassis. We have this power supply chassis that weighs about 100 pounds. But appears to be pretty much all original. We have the upper chassis that has all the stuff that has been modified. It's missing stuff. It's been tinkered with. That's going to be the biggest challenge, I do believe. I started pulling out some tubes and poking around, and I stopped myself because as I said earlier, I want to document everything thoroughly. I don't want to lose anything, misplace anything, break anything. So, starting to form plans here. Before I get to that, let's go on with what else I got. So this came all disassembled. So I've gone through what I have. So we have the two chassis. We have the picture tube I'll show you in a bit. We have this shroud of sorts, a screen bezel that goes on top of that once you put the CRT inside. Of course, we have the cabinet. So glad we have this, which is the bezel that goes over this. And as I've been talking to collectors, it seems like every one of these example that I've seen are all slightly different, and most have been modified. I've heard it speculated that originally they were all 9-inch, or while they were being made, that they made changes. It's hard to say. Especially since these were field test units and they were sent home with engineers. So I'm sure they were tinkering with these things constantly. Well, one of the changes, I've seen at least two different types of screen bezels. I think it's the early ones that were vertical, and that's probably what these two mounting holes, or traces of mounting holes, are for, and then their later ones had the horizontal, which have this. Two different cabinet styles. Some have fluting on the sides. Again, I think it's the earlier type. This one doesn't. Some have white knobs, some have brown knobs, and there's different grills. This has the horizontal. I've seen ones that are vertical. So I do have all the speaker stuff. So this is a board that the speaker mounts to. We got a backer board. I have the remains of the grill cloth. And then there's this. All that mounts on the inside. So this doesn't mount quite like this. It screws in from the back side. And here's the speaker, which is in good shape, except this is rotted out. I can't quite tell if it was leather, or I think it was. And either critters or time took the toll on that. I would really like to retain this cone and spider. There's a slight tear there that could easily be glued up, and put on a new rim. I've done this before. I did, it was a Stromberg Carlson a while back. The way these are made, if it's like that one, ooh, is this riveted? Oh, please don't be riveted. It is riveted. Well, shucks. The one I did before, they were screwed. So you could take all these off and then take out this, and I was able to replace just the surround, leaving the cone in place and stuff. Well, I'll have to drill out the rivets. I mean, if anybody's, whether I do it or somebody else recones it, yeah, that needs to come out. More about that in the future. It is a nice big beefy speaker. This does have push-pull 2A3 outputs with a separate bass and treble control, so it should have some pretty nice sound, so we definitely want to put some TLC into that speaker. Very beefy field coil on it. Do have some other odds and ends. We got some bags here that are all labeled These are mostly all the screws that hold the speaker board and the speaker in place. And we have some odds and ends. I'm not quite sure what this is for or what this block of wood is for. Hopefully that will become apparent as I reassemble it. Also found this out, which unfortunately is broken. It's cool that I have even this though, because some of the examples I've seen, this is gone. This is where your antenna hooked up, on the back of it. It was mounted to the top of the cabinet like so, and it snapped off. Looks like it was phenolic. Most of it's there. I could glue that back together. There will be a void. This corner's gone, and this binding post is a bit busted. But I'm glad I have most of it. This is the kind of thing that could quite possibly be 3D printed. This whole board replaced. Something like that. But I'd like to try to glue and patch up what I have. A couple more bits of hardware. And then, of course, there's the cabinet itself. Now, my thought was, for now, until I really dive into restoring it, I put it back together. But I realize that's not so easy to do for a few reasons. One, the veneer's separating on the back. It's separating both on the inner surface and the outer surface, so it's widened out. If you go to slide that chassis in, it catches the wood on the edge, and I could see it getting torn out. Because these chassis are very heavy, and to try to carefully maneuver it into the cabinet is not so easy. Now, at least this panel comes out. But if I had somebody else here helping me, I think it'd be a whole lot easier. That chassis has a bumper, like a roller on either side. It needs to go into, well, there's one of these on each side. So it needs to be lifted up and then carefully dropped into place. So, a little bit of a challenge. This does come off, which helps. Let's see where that chassis sits down in there. Well, I'd like to get the cabinet, of course, refinished, restored. I could theoretically do it myself. I'd rather not. Simply because I think my time and energies would be better spent on the electronics than the cabinet. I know I do cabinet work, but I'm not set up to do it professionally. And I think a professional could do a better job with something like the veneer separator, because I've seen setups where, well, one, they know how better to inject adhesive in there or replace the whole sheet if need be. And I've seen cool things that are like giant vacuum bags where you suck the air out and the atmospheric pressure pushes down on this whole surface to really get that veneer re-adhered to the side, versus me using little C-clamps or something like that. It's not quite the same. Now, a couple places on my short list to refinish it are not nearby. That's why I said I'd rather wait till nicer weather, because maybe I would ship it to them, but it'd be kind of fun to do a road trip and pick it up in person and bring it back, if at all possible. But again, we'll save that for the future. All right, how about that picture too? All right, here you all go. So what type is it? Well, it's effectively a 12AP4, but it doesn't say 12LP4 on it. What it says is C7318E factory made. I think there was an OK on there, but the paper label's rubbed off a little bit. The getters are shiny. That's all I know. Testing it, we'll see, it has an odd base on it. I think it runs on 2.5 volts. If I look up data for a 12LP4, I can probably test this on my Suncor CR70. So we'll get to that eventually. But right now, I want to point the camera at myself and tell you a bit about what I know and what I'm going to do next. Okay, where to start? Well, first off, a number of you asked me, where did it come from? How did I find out about it? Well, I don't know the full story, but I heard from a few people that came from Texas, And that was confirmed by the gentleman that owns and runs the Early Television Museum in Hilliard, Ohio. Further, the previous owner, who had it in Texas, I believe reached out to Steve at the museum to get advice on what to do with it, how to sell it. And he spread the word to other collectors, I do believe is what happened. And eventually one of those collectors did buy it, and that's who I got it from. And he had actually reached out to me, I had forgotten about this, a few years ago, asking if I would be interested in restoring it for him. And I gracefully declined, saying that it was a bit too much for me to take on, plus honestly I didn't want the liability. If I broke something, it would be bad for him, but I'd also feel terrible about it. I didn't feel up to the challenge. Well, flash forward a few years, and he decided that the set should be passed on to somebody, and well, that somebody ended up being me. So, long story short, I have the set now. So, originally it was in New York. How it got from New York to Texas, I do not know. But after it was in Texas, it ended up in Philadelphia, where I got it, and now it is in Chicago, Illinois. And my intent is to restore it to some degree. Talk about that a bit more in a sec. Now, I also heard from a few other collectors. I've mentioned before there are a handful of these sets that are in private collections in private hands. I've now heard from most of those folks, all 3 or 4 of them. Again, through word of mouth, because there's so few people. I guess you could say at this level of collecting, or so few people have pre-war sets that kind of all know each other, and they go to the conventions and whatnot. There's a little bit of a network of folks. So I heard from one guy who gave me a lot of info, who knew about this set. In fact, I think they all knew about this set because I think Steve had reached out to them all and asked, and said, "Hey, are you interested in this set that's in Texas?" So so this guy filled me in on a few things. One, that picture tube is not the original. Originally, it would have either had a 9, or if it was a 12, it was differently shaped. Some of you may have seen me post photos of early large picture tubes, like the Dumont made a 20 AP4. They're very bulbous, like hand-blown glass. That's what this would have had originally. This will work electrically, but as he pointed out, I'll find out when I slide this into that shroud. There are some support fingers inside. He said they aren't quite going to match up with this properly. But he also said, and I kind of picked this up myself looking at various photos, and some of these collectors provided me with beautiful photos of their sets, is that they're all slightly different. And most have been modified or tinkered with, which is not at all surprising because that was the whole point of them making this, was to put them out in the field and tinker with them and try stuff out, which led to the actual commercial production run in 39, 40, 41 of the TRK sets that they did sell to the public. These were basically engineered samples. So the original CRT was green phosphor 9-inch. There are 2 of those apparently in the world, one of which is at the Early Television Museum in Hilliard, Ohio. The other, I think, is in Canada. Or no, sorry, it's with one of the other private collectors. There's actually a collector there who has 2 of these, a 9-inch and a 12-inch, I do believe. And he's been a wonderful source of information. He also filled me in a lot about the tube lineup. When he asked me, hey, do you still have this tube or does it have that tube in there? So, as we saw, that originally these had some experimental tubes, an A305A and an A306A. They changed that up as time went on. In fact, there is a little bit of an owner's guide or technical manual that's been scanned on the Early Television Museum. It's about 14 pages long, has a partial schematic with no component values, a partial parts list, tube charts, some IF diagrams and lists all the controls on it and has some photos of it. The tube lineup in that publication is not the same as the tube lineup in the inside of my cabinet, which neither one of which is the same as what I actually found in the chassis. So mine does or did have 4 of those experimental tubes, 2 of the 305s and 2 of the 306s. I still have 1 of the 305s and I think 2 of the 306s. 1 of the 305s is an empty socket now because that's where the modified tuner, they stuck wires right into the tube socket, I think, something like that. It was the mixer tube. But on the tube chart that's in that manual, 1 of those 305s has been replaced with a 6D6, which is a common off-the-shelf tube. So what I'm thinking, if I really want to get this back, so I'm not about restoring it, is what is original? When even within the official production run there were changes. Apparently also some of these sets, the 42s were replaced with 807s. Those drive the horizontal yoke windings. I don't know if that was done by later tinkerers or it was done by RCA during a production run. I don't know. You also seem to indicate that they may have added DC restoration at some point. The other fun thing is that the terms they use on these sets is not what we're used to. So sorry, I don't have it right in front of me, but sort of brightness, I think it says background. Instead of contrast, it's sharpness, it's things like that. So there's a part of the circuit that's called sort of like automatic background, which might be DC restoration. I just know there are 2 6H6 dual diodes in there, one of which might be used for DC restoration, which would be a nice thing to have because it is AC coupled signal going to the video amp, so you lose that DC reference. But back to restoring it up to all originality. So if I only have 1 of the 305 tubes and there was a variation that only used 1, I can move the one I do have from where it's currently at to where I have an empty socket and put a 6D6 in place of it, which would match at least one of the variations. And mine does, like I said, the original 42s. I think all the rest of the tubes match the original specs with one exception. So let's get to the real ugliness about this project. The cabinet we can glue and refinish. The speaker we can recone. We can patch up frayed wiring. We can replace missing tubes. But so far, without having it going into real depth, know about 2 major things that jumped out at me right away. One I knew before I even bought it. The tuner's gone. There was a substitute tuner put in there, and they drilled a hole in the cabinet and ran the shaft out of it. I don't have that tuner. I know the guy I got it from had taken it out because he knew it wasn't originally labeled the wires where it had hooked up. I've honestly forgot to ask about it when I picked up the set. I contacted him afterwards and he thought that it was in a box of miscellaneous stuff, but it wasn't. So he's going to go look for it. So there's a possibility we'll get it. I can see it in some of the early photos that he had sent me that he took as soon as he got it. So I have some notion of what it looked like, but not enough to tell quite how it worked. Now, on the positive side, the original tuner is super basic. It's not like later tuners. I was thinking I could use, it was continuously variable, and I was thinking I could use a Mallory and duck tuner or something like that. No. If you're familiar with a Mallory and duck tuner, it has 3 tubes in it. As did many tuners. And one of the tubes would be an RF front end wideband amp, or tuned amp. Then there'd be a local oscillator tube, and then there'd be a mixer tube. Sometimes they use 3 6J6s or similar tubes. Miniature, higher frequency tubes that were not available when this was made. So this tuner, which I did find a grainy photo of, and I found some theory of how it worked in an old Zworkin book. The original tuner, this had no RF front end. Kind of like a spectrum analyzer where the antenna just went right into the mixer. So all that was on the tuner was 1 tube, just a local oscillator. That's it. The mixer tube is the missing A305 that's on the main chassis. So the tuner only had one tube in it, and that was it was just a variable local oscillator. I think it was a gained 3-section cap, like you'd find in an AM or vintage shortwave radio. So one thought I had is if I could find an old Hallicrafter shortwave radio, something like that, scavenge one out of one of those. It can cover the frequency range. Maybe I could even remove some of the plates of the variable cap. The tuning range was around 40 to 90 megahertz, continuously variable. But also, as I was just chatting with somebody about this set, I don't need it to tune the entire range. If I want to demo this, fire it up, if I could tune in one station, that would be sufficient. So we can talk about just a narrow range. So at the simplest level, all I need to do is make a variable sine wave oscillator that can cover somewhere around 50, 60, 70 megahertz, plus minus 5 megahertz, something like that. Which do plenty of things. Do a Colpitts oscillator. It's just a basic thing to make a VFO that so many hobbyists have done before. I'm sure I can manage that. Now, ideally, it should also have a tuned antenna input and a band pass on the output going to the mixer, probably. But again, that's all pretty basic ham DIY kind of stuff. So I think I can manage it. Now, what was tricky for them back then is those are really high frequencies. You know, most of the tubes made back then were for like AM radio, which was topped out at 2 megahertz, or maybe some shortwave stuff into the single digits, or maybe 10 megahertz, 12, 20. Not 50, 60, up to 90 megahertz. Most tubes couldn't do that. But what they did is they used a Type 76. And it was mounted at a crazy angle, going like right into the variable cap to like minimize stray inductance and capacitance and all that. So I have some idea what it looked like. I think the only really difficult thing was that it had like a concave tuning dial, I think with a light behind it. So you could see, or in front of it with like a vernier markings around it of like the numbers 50, 60, 70, 80. So you can see what frequency you were tuned to. But again, hey, if I get good reference stuff, 3D print one, right? So I don't think that's that horrible. What was also potentially not horrible is there's a section of the chassis, I think I mentioned earlier, where it's been some major tinkerage has gone on, where there's a transformer missing and a tube socket has been replaced with an octal socket and a thyrotron put in there. I've since come to realize, oh, that's either the vertical or horizontal oscillator. The horizontal and vertical oscillators in this set are identical looking circuits. They both use, I think it's a 6A6 dual triode tube and a blocking oscillator transformer. It's a real simple, basic sawtooth type oscillator. What I suspect happened is a transformer went open, which is common in lots of later sets. Blocking oscillators, there's plenty of replacement ones floating around on eBay right now, probably. They probably went open and they couldn't get replacements. These things were all like handmade practically. So they probably replaced it with a relaxation oscillator or something built around the thyrotron, which was commonly used in oscilloscopes. I could leave it as is, but I think restoring it to stock wouldn't be that hard. 6A6s are common enough. I can get the 6-pin base for it readily enough. And if they didn't cut a hole in the chassis, maybe the mounting holes are still there. I can mount try to find a socket that's the same as the others that are in the set and replace that, which leaves a transformer. Now, I don't know if it's a vertical or the horizontal. The vertical, one of them is going to run at around 60 hertz, I guess, and the other would be, this was not 525 line, so this would be, I think it was originally 343 and later 441 line, so maybe 12 kilohertz or something like that. Which would also, yeah, I could get one hand wound. I could reverse engineer the circuit and figure out what proper turn ratio and inductance would make this thing oscillate. I could tinker around on a breadboard and build up an oscillator and get something working. Or what I was thinking is, as I said, there are plenty of replacement blocking oscillator transformers out there, and if I want this to run on 525 line NTSC, I can just buy one of those, hide it inside a can that looks the same as what had been there originally, and design it to run at 15.75 kilohertz. So those are the two major things. The rest of it, the IF tubes and all that, and the shields and the wiring, looks to be original. I said the power supply looks to be original. It's just all in terrible condition. Which stinks for me, but it also gives everybody an opportunity to see one of these in minute detail and go through the restoration process, because I can tell you, all the other ones I've seen and gotten photos of are in immaculate condition, and I wouldn't dare ask another collector to pull chassis and take reference photos for me, nor do I want it. If I get invited over to somebody's home, I do not want to pull the chassis out of their sets either, because they're all gorgeous. I don't know if everybody's had their cabinets refinished or they were taken immaculate care of, but boy, I mean, I really, as I've posted some stuff, I have my work cut out for me if I want to match the levels of theirs. Now, if I send the cabinet out to a professional, be it Fred Taylor or someone else, I have faith in them that they will make the cabinet look spectacular. So I will throw this out there too, as far as restoring it goes. I could just get the cabinet beautifully restored, put all this stuff back inside as is, and we're done. And there are definitely collectors out there who would do that, and that's totally cool. Not everything needs to be fixed or repaired, or not everything can be fixed or repaired. Say the picture tube's done. Yeah, there are 12 AP4s out there, but it would not be easy to get one. Could I modify, use a more common 12 LP4 or something like that? But yeah, then I have to start change the yoke and mounting, and how far would, there's a balance between how badly do you want it to work versus keeping it as original as possible, and then what about the value of it? I'm not terribly concerned about the value aspect of it, especially because there are other examples of it scattered around museums and with other collectors that are in phenomenal condition, all original or mostly original. So it's not like this is the only one in the world. It's the only one in the world that I know of that's in bad condition, which I think gives me a little leeway. Like, the tuner's gone, so who's to say I have to put in a tuner that's exactly the same as the one that was in there? I'm never going to find one. And unless I get my hands on one and can 3D scan it or something and know, like, take every possible dimension and have one fabricated that's exactly the same, it's never going to be exactly, well, it will never be original, but it also won't be very close to what was original. Now, also, a bunch of parts will be replaced. Somebody mentioned about restuffing the caps. Well, on the main upper chassis, there's a bunch of replacement caps in there already. Wiring has been changed. Tube sockets have been changed. Stuff has been reshuffled. What's original and what isn't? I don't have all the original parts. I probably won't be able to get all the original parts. So where does that leave me? Do I try to get photos of one that is all original and fabricate, print, make cardboard tubes that look the same, put new caps inside, seal them up, dip them in wax and all that? Or do I just accept it is what it is and put new parts that are visible as new parts? I haven't decided. I'm sure everybody out there has got an opinion, and some of you will let me know what your opinion is. I'll tell you what I'm leaning towards, considering how crummy so much of the wiring is. It's brittle, it's natural rubber like the high voltage lead. I can see it's already been cracked, it has old cloth electrical tape wrapped around it, and that's falling apart already. Like, I need to also make this thing, if it's going to operate, be at least some degree of safe and solid wiring and insulation and all that. So I'm going to have to replace some wires. And again, I cannot get the exact wires like they use. And if you're saying, oh, there's cloth wire out there, yeah, sure, I have some. I've used some in the past. It's not as available as it was, but the stuff I have and the stuff I've seen is just modern plastic wiring with cloth put over it, so they can maintain that 600-volt rating or whatever it may be. Which means it's thicker than the original stuff. It doesn't look quite like the original stuff. So if it's not going to be exactly the same as what was in there, do I care about it looking even remotely like was there, or should I just use brand new plastic insulated, brightly colored wire so it's obvious? You know, you see this like with painting restorers or anything that gets restored is, do you want to deceive somebody into thinking that it's 100% original, or do you want to make it pretty clear, this is original, we're preserving this, and this is what was added? Like when they touch up paintings, they use special kinds of paints that can be removed safely without disturbing the original paint. And it's pretty obvious to somebody who knows what to look for what is original and what isn't. I'm kind of more inclined to do that. Like that main high voltage lead to the CRT, it's shot, it's gone. I would be okay just using a piece of bright red 40 kilovolt rated high voltage wire to go to it. And I'll keep all the stuff I take out of it and put it in a box, carefully label it. This was the original high voltage lead. See, here's what it looked like, here's what it was made out of. But that's not what's in the set right now, because it needs to be functional and safe. So with that being said, I do have, there is service info out there. I'm working on getting a legible, good copy of it. What I have so far is enough for me to see that, yes, there is a complete schematic, but I can't read it because it's a poor quality scan, but I'm pretty sure I'll get one. So what I'm thinking is, I'll start with the power supply, because that is the most complete and original and straightforward to do. Because it's so old, it's mostly transformers and chokes. I think there's maybe 5, there's 3 transformers, and I think 6 filter chokes, maybe 5 filter caps, and a handful of resistors and a few tubes. So let's get that squared away. When we're doing that, of course, we can test the power transformers, and without a functioning power supply, nothing's going to work. So let's do that first. And then the main chassis. I can't do anything with that till I get service info and ideally more reference photos. Now the museum in Hilliard, Ohio has one. And it's the early incarnation with a 9-inch CRT, which should be pretty darn close to what I have. I will have access to that. And I may make a trip before the convention, sometime over the winter, to go there. I want to drop some stuff off, and I may meet some friends there. And as you saw, that front panel comes off pretty easily. And I don't think there's a back. I don't think these came with backs. So I should be able to, without disturbing anything, take a bunch of detailed reference photos and videos to come back and compare to mine. Also, I'm thinking at the convention in May, assuming I go, and I'm planning on going, I would like to bring my chassis with me, depending on how far I've gotten between now and then. One, I thought maybe I could do a little show and tell, Q&A, and display it for you guys to see, those of you going to the convention to see. But also, I could then compare it in person to another set. Or the other few private collectors that have one, as I say, I don't feel comfortable trying to take one of their sets apart, and I don't think they would let me. I wouldn't. But I might be able to visit one of their places, one of their homes, and at least, get what info I can out of it. So that's what I'm thinking of starting. I have to get good service info, start with the power supply, and then work my way up to the main chassis. And at some point, get the speaker recone, get the cabinet refinished professionally, and so on, which will not be cheap, by the way. So that's another thing is, I don't expect this to be quick. I don't expect this to be inexpensive. I'm in this for the long haul, so we're going to take our time with this, and I'm going to intersperse it with plenty of other projects as we go. Sorry for all the yapping, but a project of this magnitude, I think, requires a lot of planning, which is the final thing I want to talk about is, how am I actually going to work on this? as you can see, it's in there with a room with some other stuff, like what CTC5 I'm currently working on. Right now, it'd be awesome if I had a room that I could dedicate just to this project and only have this in it, and it spread it all out. That's not reality. Also, those chassis are very heavy. The power supply is extremely heavy. So, although I have a nice long, 8-foot long, very sturdy workbench that can easily has the space and can handle the weight, working on these is not going to be trivial because I can't just pick it up and flip it around and spin it around and all that. So I'm going to take a suggestion that several of you gave me a long time ago when I was building my workbench, which is to make a heavy-duty Lazy Susan. So like a ball bearing plate, put a piece of wood on top of it, and put the chassis on that on the workbench so I can rotate it around easily while I'm working on it. That type of thing. Also the cabinet. Yeah, the veneer is separating, but the main core of it, the framework, is pretty solid. But the bottom of it just has a couple little metal caps. And this whole set assembled is over 200 pounds. So it's on carpeting right now. I can't really move it around. So I got planned for that too. My workshop is also carpeted. When I was building my workbench, I got a suggestion from several of you, which I implemented, which is to make platforms that can glide around the carpet. So take a piece of plywood or 2x4s, make up a frame, and slap a bunch of these underneath, furniture glides, and then put your set or chassis or whatever on top of that and slide it around. Yeah, you can get furniture glides that they peel off with their self-adhesive or they have a nail or a screw on the back side. I don't want to put those on this cabinet. I don't want to get goo on it or put holes in it. So I want to put it on a piece of plywood and then put the glides under the plywood so I can move and spin the cabinet around. So I'll be putting that together too. I think that's enough for now. So I've got more work cut out for me. I'll leave you with one final thought. I do have a Patreon account. And I've been talking about this set for weeks there, because I'm just trying to decide whether or not I want to even take this project on. But also, as I've been doing all this research, I've been sharing photos and documents and links. This is much easier to share documents there, because you can upload documents and post links, and you can't really do that on YouTube too easily. So for as little as $1 a month, you can join my Patreon and find out a lot more of what's been going on behind the scenes. Plus, I appreciate the support, and it helps to fund projects like this. That's it for now. Thanks for watching.